The president has gone before a commission to answer crucial questions about things that went on under his watch as deputy president and under his party's watch. But many quarters are disappointed with President Cyril Ramaphosa's appearance before the State Capture Commission. And tonight we're asking if an opportunity for openness and frankness has been lost. One of the areas where the president was particularly vague pertains to the State Security Agency. He deflected some questions. There is concern after it emerged that people were trained and armed but not vetted by the security agency and were reportedly allocated as a private security force to ex-President Jacob Zuma. The evidence leader brought up a report highlighting various issues that doesn't seem to have been acted upon recently. To discuss, we're now joined by the Director of Open Secrets, Hennie from Vuuren, and political editor at News 24, Qaanitah Hunter. Thank you for being with us both. Let me ask you the same question, starting with you, Qaanitah. Was this an opportunity lost, or should we be giving the president some credit for the accountability that I guess has been shown?
I think holistically it was, it was to his credit that he appeared before the Zondo Commission and that he opened himself up and made very important concessions around the fact that things were not done right prior to this, that there were mistakes made, and that they effectively dropped the ball. Now, where there was an opportunity missed is regarding the specifics. And I think the State Security Agency is an interesting test case in the broader picture of state capture. And that's because President Cyril Ramaphosa himself commissioned a report in 2018 called the High Panel Review Report, which was led by his now security advisor, Dr. Sidney Mufamadi. And that report has been on his desk for 3 months, and nothing has come out from it. And he's now moved the wall now, or the goalpost, and has now said that he's not going to act on that report in relation to significant evidence against a member of his executive, a senior member of government, and others, because he's waiting for the outcome of the Zondo Commission. And I think that was completely unsatisfactory. And more importantly, his answers showed that he has, in these last 3 years, not acted to just stabilize and deal with the issues of the State Security Agency. Yeah. Like I said, it was, the State Security Agency was the sort of the most captured institutions under the former administration. And if there was any institution that could have been reformed, it could have been the State Security Agency.
Hennie, do you agree?
Well, I think certainly I agree with what Qaanitah is saying, that it was a good opportunity to have a sitting head of state appear before a commission like this. And I think, Francis, maybe to add, this is not the first time in the last decade that this has happened. We shouldn't forget that Thabo Mbeki, then a former president, of course, appeared before the Seriti Commission into the arms deal in the last decade. But equally, I think those were both unsatisfactory performances. And I think the challenge for us as South Africans is that we should stop seeing it as enough that heads of state or former heads of state are treated almost like royalty. The fact their mere appearance suggests that there's an adherence to the rule of law, of course, in comparison to Jacob Zuma as a former head of state who just refuses to comply with the rule of law and acted in a criminal manner. But that isn't enough. In fact, we need to see far more in terms of the substance of information from somebody like former President Ramaphosa. And I feel that it was important that we saw the evidence leaders push him to the extent that they did on certain key issues. I would have liked to have seen him in the hot seat for an additional couple of days and really being pushed even harder to respond more forthrightly on certain issues. He obviously represents the interests of his party, and there are elections coming up in the next 6 odd months. But equally, these are the moments in which he can really affirm those constitutional values which you all hold so very dear. And the best way to do that is to speak openly about the challenges that are taking place within government. Yeah. Otherwise, the risk is that we have a very long process on the Commission of Inquiry that disgorges a huge amount of information onto us as the public, as important as that is. But we are, in fact, overwhelmed by this transparency, the data that comes out without seeing the kind of action that's required. And I don't think we heard the urgency from the president that we needed. And I think that Juanita's point around state security agency is incredibly important, because we've had a president who's been receiving reports from the state security agency on a weekly basis since he has been in office for a number of years. I can only imagine how poor many of those reports are that he's been receiving if they weren't able to predict the violence that we saw escalate in KwaZulu-Natal. How often has he taken those reports and thrown them back to the head of state security agency and said, if you don't produce something of value by next week, Thursday, when you submit to me, you are fired? And certainly we've seen no indication of that. Yeah. Is he going to change the way in which he deals with state security agency? Well, the test is now, because they're sitting in his office as he's wished for.
Juanita, is it correct to say that nothing has been done? Weren't some new leaders brought into the State Security Agency? And recently, this agency has now been put under the presidency. That was something that he mentioned. Does that suggest any action? If it does not, how sinister is it to you that the president is being reticent about state security? Does that suggest he's being cautious? There's some things he doesn't want to delve into for security reasons, maybe because it could be embarrassing, or is it sinister in a way that suggests some sort of complicity with what happened in the past? How seriously do you take it?
I think there was an effort initially to bring some sort of stability to the SSA by the, they made an appointment, which was the appointment of Advocate Moafe, who's a very close friend to the president, as the head of domestic intelligence, and then Robert McBride as the head of foreign intelligence last year. But where do we sit now? We don't have a permanent director general of intelligence. The head of the domestic intelligence has now retired. The foreign intelligence head, Robert McBride, has been suspended. That's just on a leadership level. That's besides the fact that there has been no update in relation to the investigations around all of the malfeasance that persisted and that was highlighted by the Mufamadi report. We talk about the infamous Project Veza. It was, the look on President Cyril Ramaphosa's face when Advocate Paul Pretorius put it to him that some of the investigators that testified before the commission were removed from that investigation, that investigation was effectively taken away from the former acting DG, Louisa Jafta, and given to Advocate Moafe, who is now retired. But that investigation is completely moot. When the National Prosecuting Authority went to the SSA to find documents so that they can pursue criminal cases against all of these people implicated in the Mufamadi report and in evidence presented to the Zonja Commission, there was a standoff at the headquarters of the State Security Agency in Musanda. And so, there's been a continuation of the rot. There has not, the facts point to there not being an end to it, and that was put to President Cyril Ramaphosa. And to take this one step further, Advocate Paul Pretorius, put it to the president and said, don't you think because of the rot that persisted and continued to under the Ramaphosa administration, we had then seen what happened in July with the insurrection, and a lot of fingers have been pointing to a failure in security, of the security cluster. And the president says that assertion was not improbable. And that is very, very important. And it points to the direct consequence of inaction.
Yeah. Hennie, do you agree that the rot has been left? There's been huge inaction. I mean, the president did talk about the investigation, the three-person panel that is looking into things, and I think the names have been released, and a lot of the questions about how people were armed to become this sort of side force on the side of the State Security Agency. Is that enough that processes are underway?
Well, I think the question is if further people are going to investigate this, led by Professor Sandy Africa and others, these are obviously insiders. Professor Africa herself comes from state security. That is her professional background, although she's worked as an academic as well. But ultimately, the question is going to be, what is the president going to do with the information he receives? He must be sitting with dossiers that give much more detail than any of us have right now in the public as to exactly who was spied on, who not only was spied on, but was bribed by state security, including sitting judges, we are told, amongst those in the Project Justice group. We still don't have that information out in the public. It leads to an enormous amount of speculation, amount of distrust from within civil society groups. The question is, who were the spooks amongst us? Who were the people that were paid off by state security? And are they still active in our own organizations and are there to disrupt civil society and social justice movements and the student movement, for example, because it's in the interest of a particular group who remain in positions within state security and elsewhere within the state. Now, as long as we don't have that information out in the public, and it can only be aired, I would argue, Francis, if those issues leave the desk of these groups of experts who are going to look at the structures of state security and moves into the hands of the National Prosecuting Authority so that they can prosecute all of the officials who are implicated. If we had Loyiso Jafta being able to present all the evidence he wished for and probably remain in his position, and we didn't have people like Minister Dlodlo who effectively blocked the openness around these issues in front of the Zondo Commission, I think we may have seen some quicker movement. But of course, this was President Ramaphosa's minister who was blocking this, and it must have been with his okay that this was happening. She was not acting as some kind of a rogue minister or rogue agent at the time. So I think crucially, as a public, we know that the politicians are going to be involved in their own internal games and machinations. And I don't think that President Ramaphosa, despite all he says and talks about transparency, is immune to such action, because his behavior suggests he's always been an insider player. He's told the Zondo Commission, yes, I saw state capture was happening, but I stayed inside the system to change the system. And I guess he argues that's what he's doing right now. But Francis, maybe to make the point, and go back to the NPA, that's precisely why we should be demanding action from Advocate Shamila Batoy and her colleagues. We need to know, and I don't think it can be enough to say we're looking at it. We want to know, if you have the information, what are you doing? Who are you prosecuting it, and by prosecuting, and by when will that happen? And I think there needs to be far more urgency from the side of the NPA, because only then will we see proper accountability.
All right, thank you both. Our guest tonight saying an opportunity for openness missed, especially around rogue spooks in South Africa. Hennie van Vuuren, Director of Open Secrets, and Qaanitah Hunter, Political Editor at News 24.